Well, let me start again. Welcome to PwC Connecticut's second program of the season. We are delighted to have you join us. I am Patty Bellato, Manager of Marketing and Business Development for Van Zelm Engineers and President of the PwC Connecticut chapter. It's been a challenging year, but we have much to be thankful for. Thank you all for your belief in PwC, our shared vision of an integrated community, and for being so incredibly supportive, which has been so vital to our success. Together, we will get through these unsettling times, ensuring that we continue to thrive and support generations of future leaders of our industry. I would like to update you on a few items. Our new website, pwcusa.org, will launch within the week. Please take a moment to visit it to learn more about our programs, awards, scholarships, mentorship, and more. Many thanks to Nicole Peterson of Flowtech, our communications chair, for her efforts on our chapter's behalf. On December 10, National will be celebrating its 40th anniversary and hosting a 40 Under 40 Outstanding Women in Construction Awards program. 4 from Connecticut won. They are Kristen DiLoretto, NCIDQ Registered Interior Designer for Moser Pylon Nelson Architects, Nicole Peterson, Director of Marketing for Flowtech, Samantha von Stoik, Director of Strategic Partnerships for CIL, and Alicia Mojica Washington, Director of Marketing HRP Associates. Congratulations all. The deadline for nominations for the Connecticut chapter's 2020 PwC Awards has moved to December 11th. Please contact Kim Colapietro of EDI Landscape, our awards chair, if you have any questions. Lastly, our scholarship applications process will open in January. Stay tuned for more information on this. Our construction panel will begin in just a few minutes, but we want to take a moment to thank and recognize our sponsors for their support. We couldn't do this without them. Their generous gifts of time, expertise, and funds are so deeply appreciated. Please note that although our executive and annual sponsors are filled, we still do have availability in our foundation and program sponsors. If you're interested in learning more, please contact Becca Eldridge, Shepley Bullfinch, our sponsorship chair. And lastly, I'd like to wish you all a very happy and most importantly, healthy holiday season. Be well and be safe. Now it's time to turn it over to Susan Lavis of Van Zelm, our program chair, who will get us started. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So glad you could join us this evening. So in addition to our season sponsors, we have event sponsors, and they are just as important as all of our other sponsors. So for tonight's program, those sponsors are EDI Landscape, LLC, Falk Built, Harry Grodsky and Company, Inc., Mackenzie Painting Company, Mateer Bonding Associates, and Mirtha Kalina, LLP. Thanks to all of you. And thank you for joining us this evening. Before we introduce our speakers, I want to acknowledge and thank the members of the PwC Program Committee who have worked extremely hard on the preparations for this event. They are Lauren Askloff of Shipman and Goodwin, LLP, Tracy Barrett, Shawmut Design and Construction, Pat Bellato, Van Zelm Engineers, Kathy DeFrancis Vittorio of Fuss & O'Neill, who is also our Zoom master, along with Amy Ray, Melissa Roy of Tecton Architects, Amy Ray of Newman Architects, now with EDM, and Tanya Catolo of Slam Construction Services. To maximize the time allotted to us, we are going to focus, as always, on the program content rather than on extended introductions. I'm very pleased to introduce our panel this evening. In alphabetical order, they are Scott Breig, who is Senior Vice President of the Whiting Turner Contracting Company, James Culkin, Chief Operating Officer, Executive VP, and Principal at the KBE Building Company, Eric Cushman, Operations Manager for Connecticut at the Gilbane Building Company, Greg O'Neillia, Vice Chairman at ONG Industries, Inc., Guido Petra, President of Petra Construction Corporation, Lynn Temple, Chief Estimator at Turner Construction, and Our moderator, Melissa Sheffy, who is president of Network Framing Solutions, LLC. I will now turn the program over to Melissa's capable hands.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, everyone. The COVID-19 pandemic has had far-reaching impacts on the planning, implementation, and delivery of construction projects. Additionally, technology continues to transform our industry, allowing us to imagine, create, and build spaces, structures, and infrastructures for the future, including necessary preparation and precaution for infection control. AEC firms are utilizing advanced technologies to achieve operational efficiencies, reduce costs, and improve profit margins. But strong relationships and good communications are still the heart of everything we accomplish. This evening, we're going to discuss how local, regional, and national construction firms are adapting to new developments while preserving the tried and true foundations of our industry. So we'll get right into the first topic. The pandemic has altered the reality of construction and made technology more vital than ever. As contractors begin to shake off the effects of the crisis and get back to work, technology tools are becoming more vital than ever. There are a series of questions that I'm going to throw out to be answered. Have you made any recent investments in new technology? What and why will you be implementing to thrive in our new normal? Has new technology been a key factor driver for better efficiencies? And has this forced your firm to take the next step risk needed to be more technologically advanced? How has the use of this technology been an asset or hindrance with other consultants, suppliers, or contractors, and with your field operations? So choose any or those questions to answer. That was a lot. So we're going to start with Jim.
Okay. Thank you very much. You know, the last few years at KBE, we expanded our footprint to be a more regional contractor. And when we did that, we opened offices in New York and Phoenix, Arizona. I guess Phoenix really isn't regional, but at that time we made a big investment into our IT, and that was about a year and a half ago. So we were, you know, luckily ahead of the investment into IT once the pandemic hit. And one of the things we did is we set up Ring Central, which is very similar to Zoom, and all of our offices were using it for the last year and a half. So with that, we had experience so that when we did have our offices, you know, experience some shutdowns, we were communicating already via Zoom, by Ring Central, I mean. So the main components are already in place. It was just a matter of some additional training that we put in place to make sure that all of our associates could stay in touch. Now, one of your other questions touched on whether or not technology makes us more efficient. I'm not sure I would go there just yet, but just as far as staying in touch, it did, and kept all of our job sites running, because a lot of our job sites are set up already with large screens and cameras for meetings so that we can all stay in touch. But it allowed everyone to keep moving and, you know, keep the communication. So I guess from that standpoint, it did make us a lot more efficient. You also talked about whether it was a hindrance or if it changes in any way. You know, and before the call started, a few of us were talking about doing remote interviews for projects and clients. And, you know, as construction people, most of our field staff aren't the great presenters to begin with. So having them now trained to do it virtually made it even more difficult. So it took a lot more rehearsing and a lot more getting used to the software, and everyone being able to share screens and realizing you couldn't be in the same room, and a lot of those type of things that we figured out along the way. Really a lot of practice, and our IT staff and marketing staff were really working overtime to get us prepared for a lot of these interviews. But from that, I'd say it was different, not a hindrance or more efficient, but just different. That was the hardest thing to get used to. And the other is not understanding or not getting those social cues you get when you're actually speaking to people face to face. Not, you know, whether or not you're being heard, whether or not your screen is shared correctly. Those sort of things are always kind of on your mind, that you want to make sure that the technology is working the way you planned. So those were the things that were kind of difficult hurdles to get through. But, we've kept our business running, and the technology, like I said, we were set up beforehand. So we, through some additional training and a lot of patience from a lot of people, we've been able to pull through pretty well.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, Eric.
So just start by saying good evening to everyone. I hope those of you that are not on camera are sitting there on your couch, having a glass of wine and enjoying yourselves. Certainly a little different not to be in the room with everyone. I think all of us can agree that we miss it. So just a lot of questions there. So I'm going to ramble slightly and hope that I answer one of them on my way, Melissa, and just stop me if I don't. So obviously the pandemic has changed our business a little bit, and you're seeing a lot of investments in technology. I'd say one of the most successful things was pretty small, and that's really been 360-degree photography that a lot of our clients have been looking for and driving towards. Instruction site, HoloLens, a variety of pieces of technology you can use. You strap a hard hat camera onto someone's head and they get a virtual walkthrough of the job very easily. And with people working from home, a lot of our national clients have enjoyed that. It's been a simple thing to go implement, a couple $100 for a camera and some software that any of us can go use. We're starting to use other tools and just learn how to use them, not just cute marketing ways like drones as an example, where we've added to our fleet. We've got about 4 of them here in Connecticut now. We're adding 3 more pilots and 4 more drones next year because they're actually becoming tools that we know how to use instead of things that just take attractive photos at the end of a job. And they're being very valuable tools during site logistics planning and other items. I think one of the biggest things to me about technology also is just keeping it simple sometimes, right? And over the course of last year, we've had some great simple things, frankly, that aren't technology related to advance us. Some of the forms that we all try and use in Procore and other different applications can be hard for superintendents and foremen to use. One of our supers about a year ago came up with a white erase board, basically, that the trades can use. It fits inside a gang box, and they write out their STA on it every single day. They snap a photo of that and upload it into Procore. And so that foreman who hated typing the form now has an easy solution that's simple with one click of a button versus a lot of typing. And so we continue to look for opportunities like that. We're starting to watch nationally a lot of investment going on in construction technologies. You're seeing innovation funds come from various large companies. You're seeing Spot the Dog, Boston Dynamics robot roaming around a lot of job sites. And we're kind of cautiously looking into some of those new technologies. I had a phone call last week with Hilti. If you haven't looked it up, they have a product called JBot out in the market right now that'll drill into the deck above you on jobs. It's pretty neat. There are about 2 of them in the United States. And it's definitely an advancement moving forward, but it has some of its own hindrances in capacities where it actually can't drill into metal deck right now. They're still trying to work it out. I do believe over the next couple of years, as you watch companies invest right now in technology, that we'll be looking at very different job sites 2 to 3 years from now. But all of us will probably take slow steps towards it as we figure out what's next.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, Greg, you're next.
Thank you for having me. It's interesting because we do a lot of the things that Jim and Eric have mentioned, although our guys are not as photogenic, so we don't have the cameras on the hard hats yet. But, one of the, and I guess I should say everybody's probably doing this. I looked at this more of some of the technology we're using across the country a lot more intensively now than we were maybe a year or 2 ago. That's the way I looked at these questions. And so, of course, we all use virtual design and construction, or BIM, in our work efforts with laser scanning and things like that. We just implemented recently a new project management system called AConnex, which is an Oracle product. And you talked about communication before. This product allows everybody on a project, from the owner, the owner's rep, the architects, the consultants, the design consultants, and the subcontractors, to communicate in real time on all issues. Everybody can look at the same thing at the same time. That's been a big helper, especially when you can't get together for meetings and things. We started using Tri-X wearable technology on one project, which has a lot of benefits. We're using it on one job where it's very important that the workmen stay in the construction area and not wander out because of the sensitivity of the surrounding area. So we're using it for that reason, but there's a lot of other benefits to using it that we're starting to explore. We are starting to use virtual technology now to give customers an opportunity to see what the room we're going to be built for them is going to look like, which I think is very helpful. You mentioned drones. We don't use drones so much on our building projects, but we use them in our quarries and things like that to, you can fly over all our stockpiles now and they can quantify, you have the ability to quantify all the stone that's already been crushed and in the stockpile and things like that. So we use that quite a bit in our materials business. Where we self-perform on our road jobs and things like that, most of our equipment now is all GPS controlled, so that, you know, you set the control up and the bulldozer grades to the grade it's supposed to, the excavator digs to the grade it's supposed to dig. And one thing I'll talk about a little later, we installed a product called Smart Drive. We have 235 dump trucks and cement mixers on the road every day. And we've installed a thing called Smart Drive in all of those trucks, which has had tremendous benefits to our company. And I was going to talk about that a little bit more in question 4. So having said that, I turn it back over to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Greg. Lynn, you're up.
Thanks, Melissa. And like the rest, thank you for having me here tonight. It's interesting. It's tough. First of all, it's tough going last. A lot of great points by Jim and Eric and Greg. And so I'll try not to repeat on some of the stuff that they touched on. Obviously, again, you know, from a company perspective, we were pretty much ready for the pandemic when it actually hit. Not a lot of major disruption to the actual business, core business itself, but a lot of working around and figuring out how we can do things differently than we could before. And I think, you know, they touched on a lot of some of the technology and the stuff that's out there, where we are also investing in a lot of that as well. One of the things that we realized, one of the simple things, is that now here we're having a conversation on a conference call, and we all have a voice. We can all talk and we can all collaborate verbally. But when we're actually looking at content on the screen, one of the big limitations that we started to see was it was a single platform. So one of the workarounds, and I think one of the things we're hearing, is how adaptive this industry can be and the individual people that work in it. We said, how can we make this better? And so a lot of the things that we're doing on the pre-construction side anyways, we're actually using 2 different platforms at once. So we may be we're actually using the Teams platform, which is kind of the chat-based platform, if you will. And so we're able to communicate on a great level there, but we can share a screen, but we're actually running like a Zoom meeting in parallel. So we're actually able to see and be seen at the same time. So you can imagine you're trying to work with someone and visualize content. They can see you, or before you can see them, now you can see each other's work. And that's been a big differentiator as well. So I think being agile and flexible to work around these problems really has been the key. And like all the other folks have said, there's lots of little incremental things that we can do out there and make ourselves better. And I think we're pushing hard in all directions to see improvement wherever we can.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, moving on to question 2, or the next topic. The construction outlook remains upbeat despite political uncertainty, the surging COVID cases, reduced state and government tax revenues, tighter lending conditions, and less than optimal commercial real estate fundamentals. So while profit margins are expected to slip, only a small percentage of contractors, 6% or less, expect a large decline in margins. Backlog is down from a year ago, but has shown definite improvement in the recent months, showing a level of stability that was not early on. So what is your perspective with regard to the current state of the construction sector? Is it playing out as you anticipated? And this time we're going to start with Scott.
Thanks, Melissa, and welcome everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Certainly, as you outlined, there's a number of potential challenges that do face the industry economically. But I sort of look at this with a couple of lenses. One is a regional lens for our Northeast environment, and then one on a more national basis. And I'll say that the national lens is a little bit brighter than the regional, but I'll be honest, I'm pretty bullish on both of those opportunities in the environments. You know, I do believe that we're going to be able to see some growth. You know, we were able in this past summer to bring on interns. We brought in new employees. We're going to bring on new employees in this coming year.
We do think that there are opportunities to bring in new hires and that these reductions we're seeing are going to be short-lived. I will say that being deemed essential was one of the best things that ever happened to the industry. And when this all started, I talked about how great it was to be deemed essential. And then I'd follow it up immediately recognizing, but the hard thing is you actually have to be able to work as an essential worker and keep everybody safe. So that's always been truly, one of the things we had to balance. But I can't imagine what it would be like if we weren't deemed essential. And I'm sure that everybody who's a part of this can appreciate that. There are industries that are growing now, and there are certainly industries that are shrinking. One of the biggest aspects that I think you touched on that I think is crucial is that access to money is going to be a challenge for many of our potential clients. I think that good companies with good people can adjust their focus. And then if you're looking for companies that have the opportunity for growth, you're going to be able to find them out there. I will say I think it's very bullish for only 6% of companies to think that they're going to have a dramatic reduction, but I think you might as well start with a good outlook and see where it turns out.
Okay, we're going to mix it up. Guido, you haven't spoken yet, so you get to go next.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, PwC, for the invite this evening. So I think really highly of an individual by the name of Ken Simonson. He's a chief economist at the Associated General Contractors of America. Ken states, and we already know this, that the construction sector is a major contributor to the US economy. But what I thought was interesting about one of his stats is the fact that there's 680,000 construction employers in the country, and they employ 7 million people in our industry, creating $1.3 trillion of work a year. Found those stats to be somewhat interesting. And a 2019 survey that was conducted by AGC indicated that Connecticut construction contributed $8.7 billion to the state of Connecticut's GDP, which represents about 3.1% of Connecticut's GDP in 2019. Also, construction employment in Connecticut in July of 2020 totaled 57,400 people, which represents a decrease of 3.9% from July 2019, which I thought was pretty remarkable given what we've been through, only 3.9% decline. So that was interesting statistic. So how I see the current state of construction sector in Connecticut is definitely unpredictable in the short term, but I think it's somewhat predictable a year or so from now. And I say unpredictable because of the direct result of the pandemic. But our governor, who, by the way, I think is doing a really good job, at any moment now, he can shut down non-essential business at any point in time. And I do recall at one point, I think it was March, where the governor was on the fence as to whether or not construction would be considered essential or non-essential. And that got pretty scary back then, and it certainly would be a scary decision should he determine construction to be non-essential. So that's really an unpredictability element that I see that's out there. And if it were to occur, it's going to definitely result in a declining demand and employee layoffs, no question about that. But what I believe to be easily predictable is the increase in construction activity. Once the pandemic is in our rearview mirror, and as long as the Federal Reserve continues to remain committed to keeping the short-term interest rates near zero for the foreseeable future, which at the moment seems through 2022 and possibly all the way to 2024, then I think we have some light at the end of the tunnel. There's no question that year-over-year backlog of mid-sized construction companies like our own is down. But on a positive note, the past few months, many companies like ours have seen an increase in some backlog. But as quickly as that increased, we did see it somewhat disappear as soon as the second wave of COVID
kind of put a lid on that uptick. The tax legislation that was passed by the Trump administration was definitely business friendly, resulting in record-breaking low unemployment and strong GDP growth. Prior to March of this year, the Connecticut construction industry was healthy. I think the national construction industry was healthy. But all eyes are right now on the upcoming Biden administration just to see how business friendly they will be, and only time will tell. So, Melissa?
Thanks, Guido. All right, Lynn. So no one takes your ideas. You get to go.
Thanks. Guido had a lot of great points, so I'm going to have to follow that up again. But yeah, it's interesting. I think we're in unprecedented times. That's been said many times. I think our industry kind of thrives around, 4 key ingredients. If you think about it, we've got labor and material. We've got owner desire, owner need to do work, and then does the owner have the capital? Those 4 things really drive our industry and determine whether or not we have work or we don't have work. So fortunately for us, labor and materials, there was a lot of scarcity about what was going to happen with the pandemic. Would there be materials available? Fortunately, that's kind of worked its way out. Everybody, again, has figured out a workaround with their facilities. They figured out a way to work safely, much like we have done collectively on our job sites, figure out a way to keep people employed in a safe manner so that we're not creating a problem. And as someone touched on, if the governor wanted to shut down the work, if they thought that our job sites were contributing to the problem, they would. And I think fortunately, for the most part, we're able to control it by instructing all the employees to do the right thing. That whether or not the clients have the need or the capital, I think is going to continue to be one of the problems. The need part of it is interesting because many clients, if you're looking at healthcare or higher ed, which is a big portion of our portfolio, both of those still have needs, but maybe now in this time, they're a little uncertain as to exactly what those needs are. They knew exactly what they wanted prior to the pandemic. As the pandemic hit, they became very confused about what those things might be because we weren't sure what the world was going to look like. And I think as Guido said, as it starts to be in the rearview mirror, the real question for many of us is it business as usual? Will we ever see what was business as usual? And that's really hard to predict from the client side. And then certainly with client financing, they have to be bullish to say, we're okay on the backside of this, we can spend money. And certainly most businesses are doing very well. If you look at the stock market, the collective industry in the United States is up. Unemployment continues to drop nationally, is continuing to drop down, is really where it was probably 5-7 years ago. We've already got unemployment dropping below those rates. And so we're starting to, it's really only the hospitality and travel sector that's down. Almost all the other sectors have recovered, which is pretty remarkable. And again, it's a testament to they figured out a way to work around it. So I also am pretty positive. I think it's kind of played out much like I envisioned it would. And I think the reasons why I thought we'd recover is because of the unemployment rate drop so quickly and the fact that we weren't in a financial crisis. This has never been a financial crisis. It's been a pandemic that's limited our ability to work. So I think all those things point to a short downturn in the market, where the escalation rates may drop, closer to 0 for a short period of time, and then a relatively quick recovery, particularly on the backside of this, if there are vaccines available, early 2021, mid 2021.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. All right, Eric, you're up.
So a lot of good answers so far. So the question was, is it playing out as you anticipated? And I'm not too sure any of us had a crystal ball back in March to say what the heck was going to happen. Clients were staring at us, asking about escalation, asking about material and labor and what would occur. And all of us were trying to provide the best answers we could, frankly, at the time. If you go back to March, we're in Connecticut, right? It's a state I love and care about deeply, but we didn't have the strongest economy before the pandemic. Not a lot of tower cranes in New Haven and up in Hartford, and not a lot of work going on already in our state. So we think, kind of nationally from our perspective, we're seeing exactly what Lynn is talking about. Certain market sectors have been hurt. High-rise residential in New York, probably not coming back for a little while. People don't want their apartments in the city. you probably want to be a single family home builder down in Fairfield right now. You're making a lot of money as people flee out of the city. But other market sectors, industrial data centers have been winners through the COVID crisis and continue to be, which is fairly interesting. And I think for us in Connecticut, we'll see a short downturn in the economy throughout 2021 as everyone just figures out what's next. Clients are nervous to restack their corporate space. What does our healthcare program look like in our building? And that job that might have been shovel ready, in March is on pause as people figure out what's happening. We watched construction employment in our state about 3.9% down year over year, according to the AGC, as a part of the 2020 statistics. And I think that's just a sign of our state, frankly. And I agree with Guido that, politically, our state needs to continue to align to allow us to grow and come out of this crisis in a positive manner. It certainly hurt us, but I think it's going to be something that we can survive. But diversifying our market sectors for our own companies and then as a state is really what's going to be important coming out of this current COVID crisis.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jim, you're up.
Now I know how Lynn felt on the question one.
We're trying to make it fair here.
There you go. I, like everyone, I remain very optimistic on the market for 21, 22. Just with the number of opportunities we see in the areas that we're working in the regions we're working in. We were worried about, as somebody mentioned, some of the markets, like we have a lot of senior living work, and how was COVID and how is that pandemic going to affect that market? And luckily it's been, it's still been very positive with a lot of the projects moving forward. But with that, there were a number of delays. There were a number of projects that pushed, and we were fortunate not to have jobs go away, but just push from one quarter or 2 quarters, and then some into 21. But the idea of the materials and labor, the labor was always available. It was the materials that started to become a little bit more problematic, and I think it forced everyone to sort of step back a little bit and do a little bit more pre-planning. We got extended in pre-construction, a number of projects, a number of clients said, can we look at a few different things? And identifying those procurement items up front really allowed us to sort of stay on our schedule, but maybe with a little bit of a delayed start. So some of the delays actually helped get that planning in place to push the jobs along when they did start up. We saw a lot of different materials get delayed. A lot of the exterior fenestration materials were much longer lead items that did work potentially going to cause a problem, but through some good planning, it didn't. The other thing is we saw a couple people touched on it is the lending, and where we've seen recently is the secondary lending market, where it's not the primary push, but the secondary piece where people are trying to get that last little bit of lending for their projects, and that's been the part that's been a little bit delayed until the things start to open up a little bit more. There's still that uncertainty out there that has some lending institutions not being as free with their money as they were at the beginning of the year. I think that it's getting people to focus a little more, be a little bit more creative on how that happens, and but still see it being very strong, and the opportunities are still there. Not as I'm sure everybody would say, not as lucrative as they were at the beginning of the year, but they're all still there, and the market still seems strong in all the areas that we're working in.
Good, thanks, Jim. So our next topic is about safety, which is always a major concern for everybody in the construction industry. How has this pandemic affected the traditional manner in which safety measures have been managed on your job sites? And do you feel the added concern of infection on a job site has increased safety protocols, or has it interrupted them at all? So we'll start with Scott this time.
Great, thanks. I think to the first question, has the pandemic affected the traditional manner? I'd say it really has not affected that. The the four highest hazards in the industry, electrical, falls, crushed and struck by, are all still as prevalent and as big a concern now as they always have been. There clearly is now an additional need to focus on infection control and spread mitigation. And the need to wear masks, is a real thing. But it's not much different than anything else that we have to adapt to in the industry. It's going to take some time for muscle memory to be able to help take over. Social distancing is going to take some time and some planning, but it hasn't changed the other core elements and the things we need to focus on. The second part of the question was, do I think it's increased or interrupted these safety protocols? And again, I think, it's really neither of those things. I think a project or a project team or a company that has a good safety culture is not going to be impacted negatively by the need to have an additional focus on the pandemic issues. But if you had a project or a safety culture that didn't already embrace the things that were important, this is just going to add to that burden. So I think, for me, it becomes additive, but not dilutive, because the other items are still as prevalent as they always were. I think our teams need to be vigilant. That's another item of vigilance it's been added to the complexity of execution. As I said, being deemed essential was the first most important thing, and then being deemed essential and successful is obviously the second. But I really don't think that good, well-run projects are impacted by it. And I think projects that were poor before are going to be impacted negatively just because they don't have the right controls and foundational structure to it.
Thank you. All right, Jim, you're up this time.
Okay. I agree with a lot of what Scott said. We've always made safety one of our primary goals on all our projects, and implementing different protocols with wearing a mask was just like when we started wearing safety glasses on every job as well. It just became another piece of apparatus, and the guys really adapted quickly to it, and they understood. Each one of the things that became a little different is that not every state had the same protocols in place, so you had to be very flexible and had to have that education on the different job sites to keep people within the guidelines. But it again, with that, it kind of has some adaptability. We put together a QR code system on one of our federal jobs, and that allows the workers to check in every day and to do safety talks, as well as personal health checks via their cell phone before they enter the job site. And that way you can check on whether or not somebody's running a temperature, whether or not somebody called in sick, and kind of keeping track of all the workers in that way, that you're able to make sure you understand specifically, because I'm sure each of us has had a situation where someone has tested positive on a job site, and then you have to go into the tracing portion of dealing with the pandemic. But again, as Scott mentioned, if you have protocols, good safety protocols in place, a lot of this becomes easily adaptable or easier adaptable, because you're used to doing a lot of the safety you've done from day to day anyway. So although it's been a little bit more difficult, I think the jobs continue to run safely, and it's just been something that we've all adapted to.
Thanks, Jim. Eric.
Certainly say it's been a challenge. I remember in July with United Steel erecting on a project for us, trying to get 20 iron workers to throw on their masks in the middle of a 100-degree day. It's not that fun of a conversation, but like Jim mentioned, it's just another safety apparatus, right, at the end of the day. And I think, for us, one of the things I do, and this might sound a little weird, but when I walk a job, and I first arrive, I'll head over to the portalets, and you try and make sure that they're in good condition, use them, and make sure it's a spot you would send your wife, or your family member over to. And I actually think one of the good things coming out of the pandemic, frankly, is that we've all focused a little bit better on our internal cleaning and on, frankly, our job site conditions for the men and women who are on our projects every day. I think we were doing a good job beforehand, but I think we're doing a great job now, and I hope it continues after this. It's really sign of our culture and our job, frankly, when you walk into those facilities and they're clean, they're neat, they're organized, and they're ready to use for someone. And I think it shows a lot of respect to the men and women who are on our sites when we're doing a good job with that. To me, the jobs that were successful during COVID were the projects where our superintendent had kind of instilled a culture of trust with the folks who were on our job sites. And it's you can have all the rules you want in the world, you can follow your policy perfectly, but the reality is whether you have 20 or 120 folks on a job, if that superintendent isn't a leader who's allowing a vision of trust in that relationship to happen with the trades, then no matter how your policy plays out, you're going to have problems. And where we had great leadership on jobs, there was a comfort level from the men and women who were there, frankly, that we were just doing the right thing by them. Where we didn't allow the gossip mill to rule the project site and we allowed people to feel like they were being cared for, is where we succeeded. And it might have meant bending the rules a little bit. And hopefully our corporate folks aren't on the line and I'm about to get fired at the end of this. But I think the human side of the COVID pandemic was the most important thing. The reality was this wasn't maybe a cut that could hurt you pretty badly, but this is something you could take home to your family and your friends without even knowing it, right? And if we were just going to follow the rules to a T kind of perfectly, we lose the human side of it. And that loses a culture on the job that in our industry in our little state is extremely important. And the guys and gals who come to work on our jobs float between all of us, frankly, and they go to Greg's jobs, Lynn's jobs, Scott's, Jim's and Guido's, and they all know, how we treat them on their projects. And frankly, we have such a small industry in our state that we need to treat the men and women that are out there with respect and make sure that we're caring at the end of the day for their families. And this one was a little bit different. So for us, the success surrounding safety was just that, and making sure we recognize that this one was a little bit different than just having your glasses on and really hit home.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And Guido, over to you.
Okay, so, I'm off mute. One of the positives that have come out of the pandemic, at least for me, is being a grandfather. My grandchildren don't make fun of me when I ask them to wash their hands anymore. That's a big plus. In any event, there are many national organizations, public organizations, industry organizations that have been offering information over the past 6-9 months. Got very, very confusing at many points along the way. And we were trying to figure out really who to listen to. And along with that, our clients were imposing what they thought was their interpretation of all the recommendations that were being thrown all over the internet out there. And at one point, we literally had carpenters and laborers going from one job to another within a few blocks of each other and having to figure out which protocol they're supposed to be following, and got pretty confusing. But I think the dust has settled on that. Everyone's now paying attention and taking on, this CDC and the other organizations that have come to the top with really good protocols, and everyone's beginning to follow them, and it's making a big difference. It's helping the folks in our company be able to manage this, because that's the biggest problem, is managing it. Significant amount of time in our company is being directed towards the pandemic. Our operations department, risk management, human resources, they are working overtime to keep up with making sure that our employees are safe and that our job sites are safe and our office environments are safe. So there's no question it's put a big burden on certain departments more than others. However, the pandemic I've noticed, it's brought a heightened awareness to overall safety on our projects. But I do agree with my colleagues on the panel here that certainly the top safety issues are always going to be the top safety issues. But I'm copied in our company on all of our project safety site inspections. Via Procore, I'm able to get copies on all those. And I've noticed a decline in violations, which I asked our safety manager, and she indicated that all workers on our projects are paying closer attention to safety. And that was just music to my ears. And it seems to have brought definitely a heightened awareness to safety in general. And I think we're all going to benefit by that. Hopefully our EMRs are going to drop, and more people are going to go home with in a healthier state than when they came to work. So I see it being a positive. Melissa.
Thanks, Guido. According to research from McKinsey and Company, construction productivity remained relatively flat for the past few decades. Some of the technologies that may help turn this around have been discussed already, but there are others such as self-healing concrete, self-driving vehicles, GPS, scanning systems, wearable technologies such as Fitbits, 3D glasses, Google Glasses, and mobile or cloud-based applications that facilitate real-time collaboration to streamline and improve construction processes. Do you think that some of the new technology that is being incorporated in construction has more frequently will help break this flat line? And has the pandemic accelerated the adoption of any of these technologies? So Greg, let's hear from you. You've been very quiet.
Well, that's very uncharacteristic for people that know me.
Well, now it's time to shine.
Well, I don't know that the pandemic has accelerated anything that I'm going to talk about, but the technologies we're using, we find greatly have improved productivity on the job sites. And I mentioned before virtual design and construction, and using that as a tool, we've managed to eliminate a lot of unexpected change orders in the field through class detection and things like that. So that's really increased productivity on projects. And we implement that throughout all our building projects. The A-Connect system that we used as a project management system results in quicker responses to RFIs, which can delay a project when you're waiting for answers. We find that communication and collaboration really speeds up the process, so that increases productivity on a project. The Triax system we're implementing, wearable technology. One of the things you can use it for, if there's a really critical work area and you need a certain amount of manpower there, the superintendent can tell right away whether there's enough guys there to handle the task, and if not, he can quickly ship other people over. So we're finding some benefit there. And the other benefit with COVID is that if you do have an incident on the job, it's pretty easy to contact trace who was in close proximity to the fellow that possibly tested positive. I mentioned before GPS on equipment. When I think about how we used to dig for a footing or on a job, you'd have the backhoe digging with a laborer and a foreman checking the grade as the guy dug along. And now we set the GPS up and the backhoe just digs. So you've eliminated a laborer and a foreman standing around watching the machine dig. Same with you're grading a parking lot, or you're doing a rough grade on a site with a bulldozer. It eliminates a lot of people around the operation that we used to have 20 years ago. So that's helped a lot. And then I mentioned this smart drive on our trucks. As I said, we have 235 trucks, and we implemented this originally because we found that we were getting blamed for a lot of accidents and things. People might cut our trucks off, and it's hard to stop a truck and a car cuts you off, and we were getting blamed for a lot of things. And so we had to work with the Teamsters Union, and we convinced the union and the drivers that this would be a benefit because they wouldn't be blamed and they wouldn't be ticketed for things that weren't their fault. So that's how we sort of implemented it. But the unexpected benefit is that we find that the drivers are more efficient. For example, there's a camera on the driver, there's a camera focused ahead on the trucks, and on the mixers, there's also a third camera to the rear. So when you're on a site, for example, with a mixer, if you're going to back up, now the driver can see where he's going so he can maneuver more quickly around the site. That's a productivity improver. Our company policy is no cell phones. You're not supposed to talk on a cell phone. If you're trying to drive and you're on your cell phone, you're distracted, you're not going, the right speed, you're doing things. These cameras really discourage people, the drivers, from doing things they shouldn't be doing. And we find that that's increased productivity. So it's been a big benefit for us. It's lowered our insurance costs dramatically. The federal motor carriers, have to have a rating system for all your trucks and drivers. And since we've implemented this, we've been in the excellent category ever since. So it's been a big benefit to our company, and we're very pleased that we implemented it. And that's one of the newer things we've done. So. That's it.
Very nice. Thanks, Greg. Okay, Lynn.
Thanks, Melissa. So I'll take a little bit of a different tack, and Greg hit a lot of great stuff that is going on in the industry. That's definitely positive, but it's interesting. Not only did McKinsey say we were flat in terms of improving our productivity, they basically said that collectively we are underperformers. So we're all not doing too good. Yeah, that's pretty rough. But I think one of the things when you read McKinsey's, and I follow them, I read a lot of their information, they have a lot of great points. But one of the things that continually comes out in what you read is that the fact that we work and live in a very bespoke marketplace, and that's probably the single biggest inhibitor to us becoming like a factory built situation. Clients have a unique site. Clients have a unique mind in what they want to build. Things aren't the same. We'd like to think if we're building a hotel, we're going to slide in these things that all look the same. But guess what? One hotel builder wants something looks different from another hotel builder. They don't want to have the same look. They want to be different. They want to be unique. And because of that, it makes some of the things that we do large scale more difficult. The things that are happening, though, certainly is massive growth on the prefabrication side. Keeping in mind that we're in a bespoke marketplace, how do we make that faster and quicker? We start to manufacture and put things together off-site facilities, so that larger pieces of equipment, whole portions of the penthouse are coming in, pre-manufactured, pre-skidded, and that we're seeing a lot of positives. But it's, again, if you think about that world, if we're going to build pre-manufactured penthouses is a great example, and we're going to hire people to do that. Is there enough work out there to keep a competitive subcontractor market available that builds pre-manufactured penthouses? Maybe there's not. And so that, again, is all these things are impediments to us eliminating our underachiever reputation with McKinsey. And I do think that if you look at what they say, most people think that significant change will occur for sure. 90% are saying that. But most of them are saying it's in the 5 to 10 year range, more than likely it is in the short term. And I think we've got a long way to go to do some of the things where, let's say there's a laborer out on the job site his job is to go dig a ditch, just to keep it simple. And I don't know if I talked about this last year or not, but until we create a machine that is operated by someone with joysticks sitting at a computer like we are right now, that is out digging the ditch on the job site, I think until we can have that uniqueness and that incredible flexibility to it, it's going to be really difficult to improve our productivity, which, fascinating. In the 35 years that I've been in this industry, productivity and the metrics that we look at literally have not changed, despite the fact that buildings cost significantly more today than they did before. We're still not more productive. Some of that productivity is offset by some of the improvements that we made in terms of our industry. We're much more sensitive, as Greg said, to our people and how we treat them and what our expectations are for them. And so we've got a long way to go. Model-based technology is certainly a positive, and we're pushing the envelope there. But the bespoke aspect of this, the unique aspect of our industry, is really going to be the biggest challenge that we've got to overcome, in figuring out ways to create things that will allow the jobs to continue to be unique, so that the designers and the owners can get what they want.
Thanks, Lynn. And that was a perfect segue into our next topic, which is prefabrication. These are floor trusses made by Network Framing Solutions, framing and shear walls. So that's my only shameless plug. There are people out there that can prefab your projects. All right, Susan, I'm sorry. Back to the script. Okay, so multi-trade prefabrication and offsite construction and modularization are being implemented as one strategy to minimize interaction on construction sites, which is also a form of infection control, especially with COVID. Additional benefits include an increase in recycling, decrease in landfill waste, bulk discounts on material costs, reduction in safety hazards, and improved lead times. Are you implementing prefab or modularization in any of your projects? And Scott, we'll start with you.
Great. Well, I'd say, first and foremost, all the things you talked about, in addition to maybe infection control, I would say are absolutely benefits to the modularization and prefabrication. And the answer to this question of are we doing it is absolutely we're doing it. We're doing it in all different shapes and sizes and all different components depending upon projects. I think Lynn's point is so on the topic that prefabrication is in many ways customization, but for a project specific solution. So we are definitely doing it. And the thing I thought was interesting about this question, because while I agree it probably does have an infection control benefit at a job site level, I think, for this to really be considered an outcome of the pandemic would be a bit of a bridge too far for me, because this isn't something you just turn on with a light switch. I mean, this takes some planning. It takes, you got to get a really well done prefabrication and modularization takes, a holistic approach from the beginning and tries to move towards this manufacturing and assembly sensibility. And I'm telling you, which you already know, or Melissa, for sure. But so we're doing it. We're doing it on small pieces to allow increased productivity in the field for installation. We're doing it on large pieces of pods and modules. And, as Lynn talked about, full entire penthouses. I think it was a way the industry was going before the pandemic. I think that what the pandemic has done is it probably made both customers and other project participants who weren't thinking about it so much because they didn't really think they needed to be part of that necessarily to continue to thrive. I think it gave them the impetus to maybe think about what they can do to prefab. They saw projects they weren't able to maintain the workforce on, where they might have benefited from having prefabrication have been something they had done previously. So we are doing it. It is here to stay. And I think it's going to take a subcontractor community that's invested in it. It's going to take a design community. It's going to take an end client community who's invested in it, because it takes all of those people to make this a successful process. Because one-off is only, the benefits of doing it on a trade-by-trade basis is much more limited than the potential it has for a much broader application across project and the design.
Thanks, Scott. I totally agree. Eric. Well, it's all about pre-planning for a successful, your most successful project will be pre-planning and having the right team.
It is. And I think Scott and Lynn made a lot of great points on the subject already. And when you're not thinking about prefabrication in modular construction at the concept of the project, you really can't drive it home. And Lynn's point about every building being different, I think, is very important. We're not in the business of making cars where everything is repetitive and you can manufacture it on a site and do it for 100 jobs. We're using VDC, we're doing more prefab mechanical racks, and we're starting to see things like dirt partitions come onto projects to do a large job. Greg's team actually did the install on it in Norwalk last year, and it was a great project for us and a neat product for the client, and saved some time, money, and energy for everyone. But I think, for us, it's really a challenge as an industry to get everyone on the same page that really that thought about prefab starts at the beginning, because you really need to think about it from a design phase standpoint and make sure that you're incorporating what manufacturing wants to do in the building process and not really thinking about design. The designers in the room are probably throwing up as they look at the lighting above my head in the office, and I'm saying this, right? And so that's where I think it's a little bit of a challenge in our industry when we're talking about, for most of us on the line who do, healthcare, corporate, higher ed, state work and what have you, where it's not apartment jobs where the developer is really driving it just down to the lowest cost per square foot. Since we're sitting here, I can Google things to the left side and sound smarter than I really am. And I looked up Katerra's capital raised over the last couple of years was about $1.4 billion. And if you guys don't know Katerra, they're doing a job down in Stanford right now. They're one of the larger modular residential firms, and they're a vertically integrated developer, where basically they're controlling their supply chain. Some of the times they're actually financing deals that they're involved with, and they're truly controlling the process from sourcing materials, design, all the way through construction. It's a total flip on our typical project that we might be doing up at the University of Connecticut or where have you in the state, where the process is starting from a concept that the client wants to go build that's unique and different every single time. I think that Lynn's hit it right on the head, that for us as an industry to change, it needs to happen because the workforce needs it, but it's probably a 5 to 10 year process as we continue to try and figure out what's next as a part of that. What are our roles? How do we fit? And how do we make buildings that don't just look like boxes and cars, but are unique, still have architectural beauty and are interesting, but allow us to be more productive, safe in their construction.
Guido, thank you very much, Eric. Now over to you, Guido.
Thank you, Melissa. We definitely are proponents of prefab and modularization where appropriate. The required social distancing on job sites, there's no question that it's creating longer job durations in my size projects, which is forcing us to use more prefab. We don't do much of modularization because of the size of our projects are small, but definitely prefabrication is helping us reduce schedule. Modularization and prefab have been around for decades, but COVID pandemic is going to be accelerating the use of these techniques. And I think it already has. As a company, we are seeing much more use of prefabrication in the mechanical, plumbing, fire protection, and electrical trades. The racking systems going in with desired lengths for the project and being done off-site, inspections being done off-site. It's really working out well. But because of our job site sizes of our projects, we don't do much with modularization, but I'm sure Melissa can figure out a way to make it work for me at some
Give me
point.
some time, Guido. I'm sure
There
we
you
can.
go. Okay.
Thank you, Guido.
Yep.
So despite the pandemic, the push for sustainability, environmentally conscious building materials, and energy performance continues to be the forefront of the AEC industry. What are you doing? What are you seeing as new developments in this area, both locally and nationally? Greg.
Well, thank you. First of all, the building side of our business is involved in a couple of interesting projects now. One is a net zero school being designed by Tai-Soo Kim in Manchester, Buckley Elementary School, where they're going to shoot for a net zero. So that's pretty exciting to be involved with that project. Geothermal wells, photovoltaics systems, a lot of insulation added to the roof and the walls, and controls for the lighting so that as more daylight comes into the room, the lights dim or some lights go out. All of that's kind of exciting. The other project that we're involved with that's pretty interesting is in Brookfield, Huckleberry Hill Elementary School, where this is a Tecton project, and it's all the walls, foundation walls, and a lot of the walls in the building are going to be done with insulated concrete forms, which offer great energy savings. So we're very interested, very excited to be involved in that. But the project I really want to talk to you about is a project that we call here Positive, Pozzitive. And Positive is a joint venture between the O'Neillia family, my family, and the Grasso family, Lou and Pat Grasso. Lou Grasso is an engineer, and several years ago, he patented a process to deal with what they call municipal recycled glass, or MRF glass. Now, many people, when you put your glass bottles out at the curb, you think it gets recycled and comes back to you as a wine bottle or a beer bottle. Actually, most of that glass gets crushed by the recyclers and becomes fill for landfills. It's filling up the landfills in Connecticut. It's a real problem. So Lou's process that he patented takes this glass and makes it into what is called a pozzolan in our business. And we're a ready mix company. And most of you know, when you buy concrete, cement is the most expensive ingredient in the concrete. So for years, we have replaced some of the cement content with pozzolans. The traditional pozzolans have been blast furnace slag from steel mills or fly ash from coal burning power plants. And we replace up to 30, 40, sometimes 50% of the cement content with these pozzolans. Well, this glass when it's run through the mill that Lou designed and we have built it in Beacon Falls, Connecticut, and I'll give you a way to see it in a second. But we built this plant, and we take this recycled glass, which is a real problem, and we run it through the plant, and it makes a pozzolan that we can use in concrete. Now, the beauty of this particular pozzolan, it's been used for several years in New York City in sidewalk concrete. Lou had a plant up on the Hudson River that made about 6,000 tons of this a year. And they found that when you put it in concrete for sidewalks, for example, it resists the sulfite attack by the salts and things that you would put on concrete. It's fantastic for that. So of course, the highway departments are very interested in this for bridge decks and things like that. And it's because it's recycled content and it goes into a building, when you put it in the concrete and it goes into the building, you get lead points. So the Durst organization has called for it in their concrete and any buildings they've been building in New York for the last few years. Well, we took the 6,000 ton plant and we built a 50,000 ton plant, which is about to go online in another week. And we can use all of this material in the concrete, the ready mix concrete that we produce. As I said, it makes the concrete impervious to the chemicals that would eat the concrete. It adds strength to the concrete. It gets rid of a glass product that's become a nuisance for towns in the state. In the landfill, the DEEP is totally behind this product. And one of the things that produces a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere is making cement. They say a ton of cement, making a ton of cement generates almost a ton of CO2. Well, for every ton of this pozzolan you use and can replace cement, it's a ton less of cement that has to be made. So you're helping the environment that way. And as I said, it's a green building product. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about it, I'll tell you this. This is my shameless plug, Melissa.
Go for it, Greg.
If you go to our website, which is www.ogind.com, and when you get there, the sort of the top, I don't know how to describe this, but the top banner of the website, if you look there, there's 3 parallel horizontal lines up in the corner. Click on that. The screen's going to drop down. It's going to say news. Click on news, and then you're going to see a thing that says ONG Magazine Quarterly. Click on that, and the most recent volume, which is our volume 30, issue 2, 2020, says power on the cover. Start on page 8, and there's a 4-page article about this plant and the way it's going to work. So I think it's a really exciting product that's about to come on the market, and we plan to build another one of these plants in New York to service, or New York or New Jersey to service that market, one in Boston to service Boston. And my son is in one of these peer groups with similar concrete and quarry companies around the country. And it's called Granite Rock out in California is one of the companies in his peer group. And they're going to build a plant out there to take recycled glass and put it back into the marketplace as a good product. So it's a great green product, and you should read about it because it's going to be, you're going to see it more and more in our concrete that we deliver anyways. So that's it.
That's fascinating. Thanks, Greg. And Lynn, can you top that?
Wow, I cannot top that. That's a great story, Greg, and that's exactly the kind of stuff that's the kind of stuff that this world needs to do more of. So hats off to you. Great job. I'll touch maybe, are we seeing a continuous push? Yes, we're seeing a lot of clients continue to be very interested in environmentally conscious buildings. And it's not just the clients, it's actually, it's the people. It's all the people that work for us. It's the people that work for the clients. They're all looking to live and work in buildings that are environmentally conscious, that maybe have a minimal footprint, a net zero footprint or something like that. Going back to, the Kroon Hall, which was the first LEED project in Connecticut, I fortunately was the project manager on that job. And I'll never forget, the dean's comment to us when he built that building, he said, this isn't just going to be the first LEED building in Connecticut. It's going to set the bar that many people will pass in the future. And that was what he was pushing for. He wanted to go as far as he possibly could at the time, knowing that people would go well beyond. And I think we are seeing now net zero is becoming the new standard. It's no longer, really LEED Platinum, what it was at the time. Now it's all about net zero. Living Building Challenge brings a whole lot of new things into it. All these things are pushing our industry in a very positive way and doing the things like Breig has talked about. I think, Eric, you touched on Kutera, amazing company. If you haven't looked at them, they are changing the world, and we're seeing a lot of CLT timber frame demand for that, all the way from residential, all the way up to corporate headquarters. So some of you may have read Walmart has invested heavily in Structurlam to the point where Structurlam built a brand new facility right near their headquarters. They're very interested in timber frame, and so why are people interested in things like that? What drives them? And it's kind of what Breig touched on. People want to do the right thing. Generally, they want to live and work in a building that is, honoring the environment that we are in, and it's improving. And so I think we're going to continue to see that will move the mark. And as the younger generation that is, now the people that we're hiring in the next 5 to 10 years, as they become more and more decision makers, we'll see even more of it. So I'm pretty encouraged about that marketplace, and we're continuing to see, even in the pandemic, we're continuing to see a growth and a push in that direction.
Thanks, Lynn. All right, so you each have 30 seconds. We're gonna do the last question. I'm going rogue here, Susan. But you guys are really important, and I appreciate your time tonight. It's been wonderful that you spent the time and gave us your insights. We all appreciate it. So you each have 30 seconds. We can do this, guys. Please share your current biggest challenge as well as your prediction about the industry. Scott, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody. So lucky I got to go first. Biggest challenge by far is potential impacts to our projects and our participants from COVID. It is a very, very consuming activity for individuals, between travel restrictions, potential disruptions for workforce and site operations. So that is absolutely our biggest challenge. Predictions, I'll only take two, so we're short on time. One is the same one that's probably been for years. There is and will continue to be a labor shortage in construction, and it's something that we as an industry need to take on. From, say, a new prediction, there's going to be financial distress in the industry. Owners, contractors, subcontractors, suppliers, we as leaders of the industry need to be aware of that and working to try and be sure that we're working to help those people we can to not have some financial distress, be able to recognize it when it's coming, to try and avoid getting entangled in that sort of a challenge that's going to hit the industry for sure.
Thank you. Lynn, you're up.
Wow. Okay, so biggest challenges. I think, we touched a lot on safety, and I know I ended last time on a kind of a negative note on safety and how we've got a long way to go. But I hope that all the things that we've talked about, like prefabrication, modularization, all those things are going to push our industry into a safer, more productive one. And I think we've got a long way to go for that. And I think, that's where I think we're going to, and I'm very bullish on what I think is going to happen over the next few years. I feel like as things start to settle down, the pandemic goes into rearview mirror, I think we're going to feel this, almost 70s feeling post-pandemic. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how clients respond to that. But I think it could be very positive.
Thank you. Jim.
As far as a challenge, I look at keeping the balance of our people, not just the balance, but all of our people safe as we're going through this pandemic. We had a situation the other day on a project where an entire company got COVID. So that's a challenge to look at, to make sure we keep everybody safe and everybody goes home at the end of the day. As far as a prediction, I talked about it earlier. I think it's still going strong right now. I'm not sure exactly. I don't really see the effects of things falling off immediately, but it's going to be interesting to what happens kind of post-pandemic as to whether or not there's a pause going forward or whether things are in place right now just continue.
Thanks. Eric.
One of the things that Bill Gilbane used to say a lot is companies don't build buildings, people do. It's really been something that I've learned as I entered the industry, especially in Connecticut, that it's really a small world for us. And I think our largest challenge in our state will continue to be people. Folks have come into Connecticut over the pandemic and people have continued to leave also. And I think continuing to engage our industry and both our own employees, our peers and our trade contractors is very important for us over the next 1 to 3 years as we stabilize our state and come out of this and make sure that we have a strong industry moving forward. From a prediction standpoint, probably a flat 2020. I don't think we'll be in a recession, but I think we'll be flat with respect to our economy in the state. And I would not want to be the estimator who's plugging escalation on jobs in 22 and 23, because I think you're really starting to throw a dart at the wall for those couple of years coming out of it. And just thank you all for having us tonight.
Derek. Okay, Guido, you're up.
Yeah, I believe the largest current challenge of the mid-sized contractor in Connecticut would be the preservation of capital and company employees, so as to allow for the company's ability to respond to the inevitable rebound in the post-pandemic economy. So, and I do foresee a significant increase in construction spending in both the private and public sectors. With the biggest challenges at that point in time was going to be the availability of qualified human resources to perform the work, which is pretty much echoing what all of our panelists are saying. And thank you.
Thanks, Guido. And Greg.
Well, I guess I interpreted this question a little differently than everybody else. First of all, I agree that keeping your employees safe is the most current challenge. But speaking for our company, we actually have a lot of work for 2021. We're going to keep all our people busy and employed for 2021. I think the challenge that I see ahead is what's going to happen in 2022. Will there be a big infrastructure bill passed by Congress? And what will it look like? Will projects be shovel ready that can get on the street right away? I don't see much happening at the state level because the state's in such a hole, they can't really afford to spend a lot of money on state projects. I think that's going to be a serious challenge. So what we're thinking about is how to find work for ourselves. And one thing we've had a lot of success with the last few years, we find with mega projects around the country, and some of those are going to get canceled, of course, but the ones that do come out, there's very few bidders on them. There's 1 or 2 bidders on these mega projects. And for example, we're working on 2 projects now in Los Angeles, 2 subway projects that we joint ventured with a national contractor on. And we found that there's only 1 or 2 bidders on those projects, and you put some good margin on it and you hope for the best. And if the margin comes true, you can keep all your employees busy, whether we have immediate work here in Connecticut or not. So that's one of the things we're looking at, to challenge of those projects. And the other thing we've done is we never really did real estate development as a company. And one of my sons came into the business. And so since he's been here now about last 6 or 7 years, we've built up kind of a real estate portfolio focusing on warehouses, which are a hot topic now. And we find that when you have a tenant, even if they leave after 2 or 3 years and another one comes in, there's an opportunity to do some tenant fit up and things like that. So we're trying to make our own work. So that's what we're doing to face the challenges. That's it.
Excellent job, guys. And Susan, back over to you.
I need Kathy to start my video. Or you can hear me, but you can't see me. So I'll just start talking. I want to thank you all. Let's see. There we go. Thank you all very much for taking time to spend your time with us this evening. We really can't thank you enough. We have learned so much. It's been a tremendously valuable program, and I just, it's amazing. So I want to thank our sponsors once again, and I would like to take a moment. Normally we plan to do this at the beginning, but we had a couple of slides that did not forward. So our annual sponsors are BL Companies, Cohn Resnick, de Blasi Associates, Dietz and Company Architects, EDI Landscape LLC, Flowtech Inc., Gilbane Building Company, Hinckley Allen, J. Fierek Photography, Nicola Gester and Company PC, the Slam Collaborative Inc., and STV DPM. And our foundation sponsors are Garcia and Milas PC, Harry Grotsky and Company Inc., La Rosa Building Company, McElroy Deutsch Mulvaney and Carpenter LLP, and Shipman and Goodwin LLP. So we hope that you will all join us for our next program, which is going to be on Tuesday, January 26th, for our annual AEC Industry Women Program and Awards Program. On behalf of the board, we wish all of you panelists and all of our guests and listeners the happiest of holidays, best wishes for a much better 2021, and a very good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you all very much.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.